Once again, Luke Parker bought a lot more groceries at the supermarket than he actually needed. It was probably because Luke had been divorced for a year now, but he still couldn't get used to grocery shopping for one. Luke and his ex-wife Helen had two beautiful children who stayed with their mother by court order. Luke was very fond of Ethan and Sarah. They were the meaning of his entire life and his light at the end of the tunnel. Luke appreciated his family very much and everything that was related to it. Unfortunately, Helen felt differently and preferred a business shark from New York over the humble manager from Chicago. Therefore, paying at the checkout for a whole lot of groceries he didn't need, Luke thought about which of his friends to invite to dinner, to have someone help him eat all the extra food. Suddenly, the young man saw one of the customers insulting an old man that was begging for alms at the entrance to the supermarket. The beggar's face seemed familiar to Luke, but he couldn't remember where or when he could have seen the man. Meanwhile, the rude buyer continued to humiliate the old man. "Get out of here, you vile beggar. I won't give you a dime. Just listen to him. He needs meds. What am I, a homeless support foundation?" The fat man kept screaming as he pushed the elderly man in the chest, which almost made him lose his balance. Tears welled up in the old man's eyes, and his lips started trembling treacherously. "Hey, mister, you should be more polite, or you'll have to deal with me," Luke exclaimed, looking at the fat man with a look that clearly showed he was serious. The rude man looked at the old man's defender, and then, having assessed the threat, got noticeably quieter. The fat man didn't want to get into an actual fight, so he just nodded quickly and rushed to his car parked outside the supermarket. "How are you feeling? Are you all right?" Luke asked sympathetically, gently touching the man's hand. "Yes, thank you. I am very grateful to you," the old man stammered, wiping away the tears flowing down his face. Seeing this, the young man's heart sank. Meanwhile, the old man shuffled towards the city park, jingling the change in his pocket. "Hey, wait, can I give you a ride home? My car is parked right there," asked Luke, catching up with the old man. The beggar looked at his benefactor with gratitude and accepted his offer with a sad sigh. Luke sat the old man in his battered Ford and smiled at him encouragingly. Then the man started the engine, asked the old man's address, and drove him home. As it turned out, the old man lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city. To Luke's surprise, the beggar's home was clean and very comfortable. No trash, cigarette butts, or empty beer bottles. On top of that, as soon as the old man crossed the threshold of his house, a huge black dog ran out to greet him. It began to gallop around the owner happily, trying to lick his feet. "Lord, my boy, I'm glad to see you too. Did you miss me?" the old man asked, scratching the pet behind the ear. Luke smiled when he saw the dog and then went back to his car to get the grocery bags. When they were still on their way to the old man's house, Luke had already decided to give the old man his groceries. And when Luke came into the old man's kitchen, he knew that he'd made the right decision. That was because the only food the old man had in his kitchen were dog biscuits and some stale whole wheat bread. All the time that Luke was cooking dinner in the kitchen, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he'd seen this old man before. Finally, when the man served the food he cooked, he finally plucked up the courage and asked, "Excuse me, how should I address you, sir?" Hearing his question, the old man seemed embarrassed for a moment, and then quietly said, "My name is Richard Foster." At that very moment, Luke remembered where he'd seen the elderly man before. "Of course, Mr. Foster. How could I have not recognized you right away? I'm Luke Parker. Do you remember me? I was visiting my grandmother in a small town in South Missouri, and you lived next door. My friends and I used to prank you all the time and throw pebbles at your window. Do you really not remember me?" Luke exclaimed in a voice trembling with excitement. And when the old man teared up, Luke knew that he didn't make a mistake. "Yes, Luke, it's me. It's so sad that we only met under such circumstances. You have matured very much over the years. That's why I didn't recognize you at first," said Mr. Foster sadly. But Luke was incredibly happy to see him and rushed to hug the old man. Caught by surprise by Luke's show of feelings, Mr. Foster began to cry softly. The old man felt ashamed that in his old age, he had to beg for alms at the grocery center and supermarkets. But Luke didn't judge Mr. Foster because he felt uncomfortable about the way he and his friends used to treat the old man when they were kids. Being still very young at the time, they enjoyed pranking elderly people and playing all sorts of tricks on them. They could chalk Mr. Foster's front door or empty a trash can right on the perfectly trimmed lawn. And now, looking at the hunched-over, gray-haired old man, Luke could hardly recognize him as the Mr. Foster who was the terror of all local hooligans. Having treated the old man to a hearty dinner, Luke didn't forget about Lord either, filling its bowl up to its rims with dog biscuits. "Mr. Foster, how did you end up in Chicago? You used to live in another city," the man inquired cautiously. "Yes, that happened thanks to my daughter, Judy. She sold my big house in Missouri and bought me a smaller place in Chicago. And she kept the profit, of course. I don't blame her. Life's a difficult thing, you know?" the man answered with bitterness in his voice. "But that's just wrong. Why should you give all your savings to your daughter, thereby condemning yourself to begging?" Luke was outraged. All Mr. Foster had to say in response was that Judy was very unfortunate in her choice of boyfriends, all of whom turned out to be gigolos or just dirtbags. Having calmed down a bit, the old man added, "And now Judy's planning on selling this place too and sending me to a nursing home. I don't really mind living the rest of my life with other old people, but I just can't abandon Lord, and they don't allow dogs at the nursing home." "That's really not okay, you know that, right? Why does she make all the decisions for you?" said Luke, furious with the old man's daughter. But Mr. Foster didn't want to continue discussing this unpleasant issue, so he switched to a different topic. Luke, however, couldn't just forget what he just heard. He wanted to make amends for the way he'd behaved towards Mr. Foster back when he was a kid. Much of what he did with his friends was way out of bounds, and now, after so many years, Luke felt a sense of shame and deep remorse. After saying goodbye to Mr. Foster, the young man promised to visit him every day. It was a matter of honor for Luke now. He wanted to help the unfortunate old man who was being mistreated by his own daughter. Every morning, Luke brought Mr. Foster fresh food, newspapers, and dog food. Luke knew that the old man didn't change his ways and continued to give all his savings to his good-for-nothing daughter, Judy. "I love her, Luke. I have no one except for her and Lord. Or rather, now I also have you," the old man said with tears in his eyes, hugging his savior. One day, Luke returned from work and saw his ex-wife Helen's car parked near his house. Luke was surprised by the strange visit, but when he opened the door and came into the living room, his joy knew no bounds. It turned out that Helen didn't come alone. She had Ethan and Sarah with her. When the loving father had played with his kids for a while, his ex-wife took him aside and said, "I need to talk to you, Luke. The thing is, I'm pregnant with twins. My husband Howard, well, he's a businessman, and he won't be able to handle having 4 kids at the house, you know?" "So what are you suggesting?" Luke asked, not taking his eyes off his ex-wife even for a second. "I want Ethan and Sarah to live with you for now. You see, Howard, he just signed some new contracts, so we just won't have enough time to devote to all our children." Helen stammered on every word. I don't think I need to tell you what Luke felt at that moment. He couldn't help but tear up, because now he would finally be able to raise his own children and spend as much time with them as he always wanted. Luke hastened to assure his wife that she could rely on him. Now, the man would be taking care of his children and Mr. Foster. Since Luke spent most of the day at work, he often left Ethan and Sarah with the old man and his dog Lord, who was immensely flattered by the attention of the children. Once, coming over to Mr. Foster's house, Luke found him in a sad mood. "Judy came. She said that she found a buyer for my house. This means I'd be going to the nursing home soon, and Lord would have to go to an animal shelter," the old man said with a sad sigh. Mr. Foster's eyes were full of tears, which he could barely hold back. After listening to the old man, Luke sat down on a chair, deep in his thoughts. Actually, Luke had been long thinking about trying to buy out Mr. Foster's old house from the new owner. Luke had the money to buy it since he'd been saving up for a new car for a long time. But now, realizing that he had to do something to help Mr. Foster out, he decided to postpone the purchase of the car of his dreams. When Luke told the old man of his intentions, Mr. Foster, of course, tried to reject the offer and even begged Luke not to spend the money on him. But then, seeing how sincere Luke's desire to help was, Mr. Foster gave in. Fortunately, the new owner hadn't had any time to change anything in the layout of the house, and Mr. Foster returned to his home, which he inherited from his parents. Meanwhile, the old man decided to meet Judy halfway. He did sell his current house, but instead of giving her the entire amount, he only gave her the legally required portion, while the rest of the money Mr. Foster gave to Luke, who used it to renovate the house. Now, Ethan and Sarah come to visit the old man every weekend and run around the garden with Lord, exhausting him, while he looks like the happiest dog in the world. And Luke is happy that the old man's life seems to be working out. He's raising his children and hoping that their future will be full of love and happiness.